Thanksgiving revival, get ready for his arrival. Long live the king, yeah. Melodies from heaven, rain down on me, rain down on me.
So due to improper planning on my behalf, on my part, I actually took a 14-hour trip with my mom, my sister, and we were going to visit my little brother, who is his senior year in college. So this was a game we could not miss. And to be honest, I was so excited for this trip. Not just because my family we're used to road trips. We love road trips, but I was super excited because it was just me, my mom, and my sister. And I knew that even though we all spend a lot of time together, I knew that we would be in one space and we're driving, so no one's going to be distracted. And I knew it would be a great time for us to have great conversation. I knew it would be a great time for us to bond and to build memories together. So today, this episode will be between my mom and me.
Hello.
So the biggest conversation I felt like we had, I was asking you a lot of questions around the colliding of both of our generations. I felt like my generation, we really live in the gray. And I think it's one of my strengths. Like, I'm so understanding. I see from both sides all the time. Like, sometimes it's to a fault. Like, I'd be like, but it's hard for me to make a decision. And I was expressing that to you because I feel like I do understand all sides. I see where this person's coming from. I see where that person's coming from. And I was like kind of communicating that struggle to you. And I feel like your generation, the one you were raised in, I feel like you guys were raised in the black and white. So a lot of things were very clear cut. And so you are very strong on your values. You're very strong on what you believe. And that's a strength because you have this confidence and this boldness. But sometimes you negate the gray. So those specific situations or those small situations. And I was kind of explaining to you, obviously I was raised by you. So I feel like I understand that too. I understand black and white. I understand gray. And my dad, when we were growing up, he would always tell us, when you're listening to a teacher or a pastor or just somebody who's speaking, always take the good and throw away the bad. And I feel like that always kept me in a space of ready to learn, willing to learn. And so what I want to ask you is, in your upbringing, in your life, what are some things that you learned that you would take? And what are like some things from your generation that you would throw away?
It's very funny you asked that because there's several things that I would keep. Because I'm one of 14, our family's really big. And one thing that my parents, your grandparents, was really big on is be a person of character and integrity. And so if you say you're going to do something, do it. And if you feel like you're not able to do it, then say no. No is not a bad word. And so I think even in the white and black kind of mindset, it was a lot of things that I really valued. I really valued the fact of family, learning how to love with your heart, not just with just saying I love you, like really express, loving on people from every stage, whether it's good, bad, ugly, you still love them. And one thing that I definitely would keep, and even today, our family is really big. There's 14 kids, 48 grandchildren, 17 great-grand. Even within all those generations, I still see that thread still shining where we all still get along. We can see past the faults and all that. We deal with them, but we're still able to love them through them. And so we don't just throw people away. We hold on to our relationships. So relationships are very important to my family. Jam sessions, having those family meals, the game nights. Those things are the things that I would definitely keep, and I feel like I've passed on to you all. One thing that I would like to take, I have taken away that I learned when I was growing up is if one person's in trouble, everybody's in trouble. I hated that for the simple fact.
So if one of your siblings got in
yes,
trouble,
everybody stood in
trouble.
line, and I hated that because I would find myself saying to my
brother. Did you throw
brother,
that away? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm like, I wasn't even there. But my dad was big on if one person in trouble.
I feel
all
like
of y'all
I
stand
definitely
up.
got in some
Well,
trouble.
we'll see.
Of some stuff.
I know.
But maybe because it was confusing. You didn't know
Could
who
be.
to. But
I would ask you all, but I wouldn't blame you all. Where my dad would, I think
I know
more
what
of a
you mean.
scare tactic.
But also, you have more siblings than me.
Yes,
So
but
it's
I
a
had
lot more times to
I
get in
had
trouble.
twins above me and 2 brothers beneath me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the middle of 4 boys that like to just do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always go to my dad and say, Dad, I wasn't even there. He'd be like, it's okay, baby. I'm just trying to weed out the one that did. And it made me feel better, but I was afraid a lot, so I turned that away.
I agree. With what you kept.
Yeah,
And
I
you said I
kept,
hope
though,
I passed that on to you guys. You did. I feel like in your family, as most people can imagine, there is 14 siblings of you guys.
Yes.
Which means all different personalities, all different walks of life,
Yes.
all different kind of choices and decisions. And that's one thing that when people ask me about your family, I always say, like, I love that they just love each other no
Yeah,
matter what.
yeah.
Like, they are still close no matter what. They are still tight knit no matter what. And I feel like to your children, I feel like that expressed to us to love people, you know, through their mess and, you know, through their
Absolutely.
ups and downs
Yeah.
and their valleys and mountains. And I feel like you guys really do live that throughout.
And I do. I want to say that it's actually been a gift in disguise. It was, well, a blessing in disguise. I did not realize, me being the 11th child, so I'm the 11th and there's 3 under me. I did not realize during that time all of those different types of personalities would even help me in my adult life. Because of the role that I play in my job, I literally am the lawyer, I'm the judge, I'm the
therapist.
I'm the person that consoles, I'm the counselor. And so it has helped me even in my adult life to be that person for whoever comes into my office. And because I'm dealing with a lot of different types of personalities, but I'm already prepared for whatever they bring to me. And it is a safe space too. So my mom called me a vault. I kept that. When people tell me their deepest, darkest secrets, I can keep it to myself. And they trust me enough to know that, when I tell her this, it's not going anywhere. And so that's one thing that I value when it comes to integrity and character. So that's one thing that I've always shared with my children.
And I think when we were having the conversation, the struggle that I'm talking about, like this pull, because like how we were just talking about, in your family relationships, you learn how to love people through their ups and downs. It was really this unconditional love is the word I'm looking for. But in my generation, people my age, and I am guilty of this, that's why I'm saying like us, if I'm being honest, we are a very self-sufficient generation. And what I mean by that in connection to relationships is that we really throw away anything that doesn't benefit us. We throw away jobs, money, relationships. And I understand why we do that, because we have seen people stay too long. Like we watched parents or, generations before us, we've seen you stay too long. And we've seen the hurt and damage that could cause. And I feel like that gave us this sense of, I won't stay anywhere too long, or I won't stay anywhere long at all, that doesn't benefit me. And I feel like that is probably, when I say the struggle, the pull, because I see the positive in your family, for a perfect example. I see the positive. I see the benefit of enduring in relationships. But at the same time, seeing the other point of view, I also understand why it's important to be self-sufficient, why it's important to be independent. But I think that's why I have a struggle, is because I have 2 positive examples. I don't have like one positive and one negative. It's positivity. I mean, it's a positive side to having endurance, to seeing something through, to learning long suffering and all these different things. Which, unfortunately, if your reflex is to run, if your reflex is to give up and throw in the towel, obviously you put yourself in a position where you don't get to experience the benefit of seeing something through, of finishing something. And you don't really get to build that bond, because obviously all the things that you and your family went through, you have stronger bonds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically, as you're talking, what I'm thinking of is I think of covenant. Like if I have different relationships, right? And I look at covenant, even in marriage, right?
Yeah.
One thing I've learned, even with my parents being married for so long, and then me and your dad, we're going on 31 years. And so
Yay.
it just, yay. And one thing that I've really been reflecting on here lately is when we celebrated 30 years this year, one thing that really dawned on me is that I'm committed to loving him. Not just for what he brings to the table, but loving him as a person, right? And then I find myself, Lord, let me love him how you see him. So it takes out what my expectations of who he is, right?
What does that look like? Like, what is the difference?
The difference is when you love people through the eyes of God, you give them the grace. You give them the space to even grow themselves, where you're not trying to force them. You do these because this is what I want. It's what does God want for this person in this season at this time. So it's the freedom to grow. Because I'm growing at the same time. Like we don't stop growing, especially if you're actively learning and you're engaging in who you are and you're not stagnant in your life. Some people stop growing because they stop, wanting to do those things that are painful, those things that challenge them, those things that they don't see as opportunities for growth. Like you can always love more, you can always give more, you can always take in, but you have to have that perspective of there is more to give.
Right.
And so I think it just kind of helps in that space to allow people to just, grow into their own selves. When I say, God, show me how you see him, because the way God sees the person that we're dealing with is completely different than how we see them.
Right.
And so that's where the grace and the love continues. So even to this day, 31 years, I love him more today than I did yesterday. But it's that continual. I know. I know I say that a lot, but I really feel it and I mean it. Like I'm okay with loving him for the rest of his life, my life.
And I think more so now, like I'm 29 right now. I feel like right now I understand more and more every day. The more I interact with people, the more I go through life, I realize how much having married parents, really shaped my worldview and my point of view. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like when I was growing up, I want to say around like high school or maybe middle school, I feel like that was when the traditional family dynamic in America changed. And, maybe every generation feels like this, but I genuinely feel like I saw this shift where one year I'm in school, majority of my friends are in traditional married households. And then maybe like I go to middle school and unfortunately a lot of my friends, they're visiting their parents on alternating weekends. I feel like our generation was in like the midst of that transition to the point where now, to be honest, like it's rare to hear that, like, in my groups of people, it's rare that they grew up in a household where a marriage was modeled, or maybe they did see it and then, it led to a divorce, but it's more so rare now. If I'm talking to somebody and they say, yeah, my parents are married, and I understand how much of a privilege that is. I understand how much, and then on top of that, you guys are spiritual parents. So I feel like that is also a different point of view as well. And so I think that's probably why when we were talking in the car that I'm having this struggle, because I see one world, and then as I'm growing up as a young woman, I'm seeing a whole other world, And so I grew up around another thing, love and commitment. I've seen you just as you guys saw each other grow, as a child, I saw you guys grow. And so I'm around that. And then I grow up in the world. I'm getting older. I'm learning all these different things about love and commitment. And
looks different sometimes, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
I love you today. I don't know about tomorrow.
Yeah. And
I'll
I
come
love
back
you
next week.
Yeah. And I love you as long as you're benefiting me or XYZ, whatever it is. I love you as long as you do this. And that struggle, that pull that I'm expressing right now is this, okay, independent. I call it like the independent versus the interdependent. So I understand why you need to be independent. You know, as a woman, let's just talk from my point of view. You need to have your own money. Doesn't matter if your man has money, you need to have your own money. You need to be able to provide for yourself. And I understand that point of view. I do. Because I know that there were women who were probably in marriages where they dissolved and they were left, you know, with not a lot. So I understand that. But then we talk about interdependence now, which I feel like is what you and my dad modeled. I feel like that was what I saw. And to be honest, I was literally thinking about this the other day. My entire childhood, and I'm talking about my entire childhood, I'm talking about college. I want to say my first thought, genuinely, and this is, you know, all to you and my dad, but like my first thought of who makes more money between my parents, I never had thoughts like that. I never had a thought of, oh, my mom makes more money or my dad makes more money. Literally until I think my first thought of it, and it wasn't even like a thought, you know, like, oh, what I felt about it. It was just more so like, oh, okay, well, yeah, if you put it like that, that's who makes more money. But literally probably had to be after college. So when we talk about interdependence, that's how much you guys were one. That even it was never expressed. It was never a thought. The reason why I bring that up, there's a reason why I'm bringing this up, is because in my generation now, that's the first question. We're not even getting...
How much money do you make?
Who makes more?
Who makes more?
Who's the breadwinner? And when you're bragging to your girls, you're bragging to your friends, the highest compliment is to say, yeah, my man does this, my man does that, he pays for this, and he pays for that.
Right.
And you looking at me like...
I'm looking at you like that because as soon as you start mentioning that, it's like my internal furnace is like... But, you know, because I even remember telling you all, I knew that you all were going to be beautiful children, right? But my focus was that internally, I want them to have a good spirit, be a good person inside. Because the outside fades, right? Like, you know, I'm getting older, you know, more mature. I'll just say more mature.
Exactly.
Right? But I just think... you know, the external in the next generation is just out there more. I don't know if it's because of social media or whatever it is, but I think the internal really needs a lot of work, and a lot of people negate that part because it's like, you know, at the end of the day, regardless of how I look, I have peace.
Right.
I have love. I have those things that money just cannot buy, and I'm okay. At the end of the day, I am well. You know, and so I think it's just too more what you focus on, it grows, right? Like I focus on my internal and how I present to the world. And so those things no one can take away.
Can I tell you something?
Sure.
Because the other podcast anyway. But this just came to me. When I describe you and my dad to people, they think I'm lying. They do.
Why?
Like, they do.
What do you say?
I'm like, it's the truth. Not that I'm lying, but it's hard for them to believe. Right. Meaning, like, yeah, my parents have been married this long, and my dad is completely loyal. Like, my dad is completely, like, he does not play about my mom. He does not play. He loves God. It's like, to me, it's a normal. And when I speak about you guys to other people, you know, just talking, and we'll, you know, just have conversation, and they'll be asking me questions. And when I answer them sometimes, people literally, like, they kind of don't believe me.
It's really
literally true. Like, no, my parents love each other. They're best friends, you know, because when people think of 31 years, and I've been seeing this all over social media too. Yeah. Where it's like, oh, the husband, you know, this is how you enjoy your marriage. You just be quiet. And you learn
absolutely not.
And you learn to just say yes to whatever your wife says. Absolutely. And I'm like, both of my parents are vocal people. They are, but they're best friends, and they really love each other, and they spend all the time together. They hang out together. I can go pick up my dad's phone right now. I'm like, this is not even a. But I'm telling you these things because they are regular in relationships now. Yeah. To the point where when I do talk about you guys, it's kind of like, and they eventually get to the point where it's beautiful. Like, that's beautiful, and that's amazing.
Yeah. But it wasn't always like that to that extent, right? And that's the part of seeing your mate through the eyes of God. And so that's where the endurance, you oversee the challenges. It wasn't always like that, right? But it wasn't always like, oh my gosh, it was horrible. It was just when you have two people that are committed to God, doing things a different way. Although my family is extremely big and we're extremely close, being in a marriage is just different, right? And it's a different mindset that you go into, really want to know the person that you're in love with day in and day out.
Right.
And so one thing that your dad and I we just wanted to do things different, but we wanted to do it God's way. My mom she raised us with good godly values. My dad gave us good work ethic. So we had both worlds, right? But it was up to us, how do we take it further? And so because James spent so much time around my family, he liked those values because his was completely like how you're saying with this generation, completely torn apart, different things like that. And not necessarily good or bad, but he took the good from his family, right? And I took the good from my family and we blended them.
Right.
But as we were blending them, we wrote down the generational things we wanted, things we didn't want. And then we laid those papers before God and says, Lord, we're going to dedicate this family to you. And so we did that at the beginning of our relationship. So that was our foundation. It's not that we are doing it right. It's just we had guidance.
Right. And I think that's important to note, what you just said. Like, you guys you planned this family, meaning like it was intentional. The values of this family, I even look at my siblings. Like, we were talking the other day, like, we were just saying, like, my siblings are good people. Like, I was really telling you, like, if they were not if we were not related genuinely, these are really good people. Yeah. Like, they are great values. Like, we all have different personalities, as you know, different temperaments and everything, but just generally speaking, they're good people. And to kind of like switch gears to that, you and my dad, and we're just being honest here. I feel like, this is one of the questions that came up after we talked. Because I'm like, I should have asked her that. We kind of grew up in this bubble.
I was going to say bubble.
This shelter. We kind of grew up in this utopia of worlds. But what's interesting, and this is the question I had, is that you and my dad did not grow up in this. You grew up in like a worldly. I know you're obviously grandma was of faith, but I would say that compared to our upbringing, it was like worldly. And so after we had talked, I'm over here like, what made them decide? And I was literally thinking of this, like, they didn't give us book smarts. They didn't give us street smarts, which you both have. My dad was literally, he had his life.
Had a life.
Yeah, he had a life. But you guys did not choose to impart that. I feel like you guys raised us 95% spiritual and maybe 5% of the world. And so as I was growing up, I felt like my parents prepared me for a world that does not exist. I kind of have a sense of what the answer could be, but I wanted to ask you, to hear it from you. Why did you guys decide to go that route? With all the worldly knowledge that you have, you took on spiritual, which, to be honest, I feel like between me and my older brother, you guys were learning that too. So It's like, I'm gonna just get rid of everything else that I already know, and I'm gonna literally teach them something that I'm learning too, and we're gonna base our whole family on this.
Great question. So the reason why we decided to do it this way, because everything that we tried from our old life did not work. It was not sustainable, and it just wouldn't last. And we knew enough about God and His Word that would last no matter where you found yourself in whatever situation. And so we decided to do the 95%, as you would put it. So since you feel that way, all right. We decided to do it that way because we knew at the end of the day, when nobody's looking, the lights are off, and it's just you in your bed, that you would still have that foundation, right? Because we know life throws a lot of curveballs, right? But drinking doesn't fix it, smoking doesn't fix it, sex doesn't fix it, running doesn't fix it.
And you would know all these things that they don't fix it.
Exactly, they don't fix it. And so because we were becoming new in the faith and learning more about God and just having intimacy with Him, that we're never alone in those moments when we need somebody and have no one, right? Because you can become so independent to where you feel like you don't need anyone.
Right.
And so even in that moment, you would still have Him. And so that was more so us sticking to that guide so that you can be able to move through all these different scenarios. Because I know when you all were young, those were different prayers than from when you were teens, than from when you were young adults. And now you are adults. So being parents, praying those different type of prayers now is more spiritual warfare because you're adults now. So I know your daddy even told y'all before that, you know, those little demons, they're big ones now. And so I just say that because there is a force that you have to fight against, and you have to have a moral compass and be able to make decisions, you know, for yourself, even when nobody's around. But you want to make sure that you're making it for your life. So I guess that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that's sort of the conclusion I came to. I was like, you know what? If I was them, I would probably think that no matter what, they're going to learn life regardless.
Exactly.
I really don't have to teach them life necessarily. Like if I had to choose, because you only get to raise us once.
Exactly.
So if I had to choose, you know, I would choose to raise them the way that I know that no matter what life throws, if they have this firm foundation, if they have this, you call it the center. Like if you have this center, then you should be able to handle whatever life throws at you. It is so funny because as a child, you know, and just your naivete, like just being naive, you just I felt ill-prepared. You know, that's just how I thought of it back then, especially when I went to college. I'm like, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm not prepared for this. But little did I know I was. It was just applying those values that you guys had taught and everything. So what do you think are some blind spots of my generation? Because you have kids from 23 to 33, right? Yes, from 23 to 33. Yeah. So you are you're well versed in our generation. You know what we're kind of all about a little bit. So what would you say are our blind spots? What are some things that when you meet a 23 to 33-year-old and you like, oh, baby, you just keep living? Or, you know, what are some things you feel like we might miss?
I do meet a lot of them. And it's so funny you said, oh, baby, because in my mind, I'm like, bless you. One thing that when I meet some of the young generation, that I absolutely love the entrepreneurial mindset, because you are more risk takers, which back then it was kind of like, I don't know. And I think that being more risk takers, like that's another reflection of faith working itself out, where we would just talk about faith and just, you know, move a little bit, but you guys go straight in. But the only thing about going straight in is, you know, you don't take any guidance along the way, or you close the ear to people, which sometimes is good, sometimes it's not so good. And so our generation more so just have to give you what it is that we have, and then allow you to settle on it, take the good with the bad, depending on where you're at, if you'll even receive it. And so I think it's more of a trust kind of like.
Yeah, I think for our generation, we seek truth.
You seek truth, definitely.
We do not seek tradition.
Right, you don't.
So I don't care if you've been doing this for 50, 60, 70 years.
There's another way.
What's the truth? You know, what is the best? And that's what you're saying, is that you are in search of the truth, but that does not mean that other people are not valuable to you getting to that truth.
You getting to it, And so a lot of times, you know, like even if I call them nuggets. You can give people nuggets, plant seeds, but if they're not open to receiving in that moment, I'm okay with that, because I know that life has its own lessons, and at some point it'll come back, or someone else will come along your way, because we were never meant to do life alone. And so that's why we don't want to be too independent.
That's something for us. Like if you were to give us advice, it's just to be more open.
Be more open to
people who do have wisdom. It's not always just, oh, this is how it's always been done.
No,
there's wisdom in that.
There's wisdom in it. And you can take what's good and leave the rest
and throw away
but then that's how you create your own perspective of whatever, you're dealing with in that moment. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably it, is that, you all, I would say, just be open to learning. That would be
Yeah.
the blind spot.
I would have to agree, honestly. And you be seeing my blind spots.
It's okay. You're still growing.
So-
And you know what? You can always do it again, right? And that's the
Yeah,
thing
of
about
course.
failing, is you can still start over.
And one of the biggest advice you've ever given me, I remember it was like a big transition in my life, and you told me, Taylor, you could always start over.
You can always start over.
Always start over. And that was so freeing.
You can love again, you can jump again, you can laugh again. We'll definitely cry again. I mean, I cry when I'm happy, so it don't matter. But
So with
that's
this
it.
conversation, and we want to leave everybody with this, because you brought up a scripture while we were talking. And when you first said it, I didn't really understand how you were applying it to what we were talking about, because I had always just heard it from the lens of marriage. But I want you to read it and kind of explain how you applied that scripture to what we're talking about today.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see. Put on my assistant hat
Right.
first. So I'm going to be reading from Ecclesiastes 4. We're definitely focusing on verse 12, but I'm going to read it from the beginning because it kind of puts it all in perspective. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. But if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not easily broken. And I absolutely love Ecclesiastes 4, because it talks about relationships and how we become each other's friends. We were never meant to live this life alone, and we are so much better together because we do love each other. We're able to comfort, and there are times when, you may find yourself alone, but that's not where God never intended for us to go at life alone. And so with this in mind, we have to remember that it's not one generation is better than the next, because God is always the center as we move from one to the other. So with that in mind, I just think that that's where life is that we learn how to love through God's eyes. Each other, people that we come in contact with, because he's always in the center of everything that we do.